In the restless shadows of the modern world, some stories don't end. They simply continue. Beneath the bed, behind the mirror, or inside the camera you forgot was still recording. Welcome to Ghosts of Asia, a place where the line between the living and the lost dissolves into silence. Here, we don't chase ghosts, we listen to them. Each tale you hear is more than just fiction. It's a whispered truth, wrapped in folklore, urban rituals, and the chilling quiet of real places still haunted by what lingers unseen. Tonight's story is not from centuries ago. It's not carved in stone or buried in forgotten villages. No, it happened in a high-rise apartment in Jakarta, to a man just like you. And maybe it's still happening. Jakarta never truly sleeps. Even at 2 a.m., the city's pulse flickers through the glass windows of high-rise towers, flickering neon signs, the distant wail of motorcycles weaving through alleyways, and the hum of air conditioning units pushing against the night's humid breath. But inside a one-bedroom studio on the 15th floor of a weather-stained concrete building, the world had gone still, too still. Andra didn't notice the first shift. He was 29, freelance graphic designer, overworked, underpaid, and clinging to the brittle edge of Jakarta's big economy. His life had narrowed to a rectangle: bed, desk, toilet, fridge. Outside was noise, inside was work. Deadlines blurred into dark circles beneath his eyes. Meals were instant noodles and cold coffee. His phone's calendar was a battlefield of color-coded client revisions. And like so many nights before, he fell asleep with his laptop still glowing beside him, Photoshop open, unfinished. But that morning, that first morning, something was wrong. Not loud, not dramatic, just off. His coffee mug had moved. It had been beside his laptop when he fell asleep, he was sure of it. But now it sat on the windowsill, half full, the handle turned toward the glass as if waiting for someone else, someone polite. He stared at it for a long time, then blinked, yawned, and blamed exhaustion. The second shift came 2 nights later. He woke up to the smell of something faintly sour, like warm milk left too long in the air. The bathroom door, usually closed, was cracked open by an inch. He could have sworn he closed it. Still, nothing seemed missing. The tiles were clean, the lock was still bolted. But his stomach was restless that day, like his body knew something his brain refused to name. The third shift left footprints. That night, Jakarta roared with heavy rain, the kind that made the windows tremble. Andra worked late as usual, headphones in, hands sketching product packaging mock-ups for a vitamin startup. When he finally collapsed into bed around 2:45 a.m., his ears still buzzed with synthetic lo-fi beats. He dreamed of water, endless black water lapping at the edges of his bed. And in the morning, the footprints were there. 6 muddy outlines, small, bare, as if made by someone with narrow feet, not a child, but not quite adult either. The toes were oddly long. The prints started at the foot of his bed, looped toward the fridge, and stopped. No exit prints, no smudges on the doorknob, just a trail that ended in the middle of the floor, as if the walker had vanished. Andra froze, then laughed, then scrubbed the tiles 3 times with bleach. He told himself it was a dream, a prank, a neighbor with a spare key, an intruder. He filed a report with the building security, who shrugged, reviewed the hallway's CCTV, and found nothing. "Maybe tikus besar, Pak," the guard muttered. "Big rat. Sometimes they crawl from the walls." But rats didn't leave symmetrical human footprints. Rats didn't open his fridge. That night, Andra didn't sleep. He sat upright in bed, eyes fixed on the foot of the mattress. His building creaked, pipes moaned. Outside, lightning stitched itself across the Jakarta skyline like veins. But nothing happened. At 4 a.m., he collapsed into a restless doze, and when he woke, his bedroom chair was facing the bed, perfectly centered, as if someone had sat and watched him. Still, no sign of forced entry, no evidence. He began asking himself the one question he feared most. What if I'm not losing sleep, but losing time? He downloaded a motion sensor camera app and repurposed an old iPhone, taping it to a tripod near the closet, just in case it was a rat, or a burglar, or worse, a breakdown. The next night, he hit record, then tried to sleep. But sleep doesn't come easy when you suspect you're not alone. His eyes fluttered open at every sound, every shadow, every tick of the wall clock. He drifted off sometime after 3 a.m., clutching the blanket like armor. In the morning, the footage was there. 1 hour, 42 minutes, grainy black and white, mostly silence. Then, at exactly 2:11 a.m., the recording picked up movement. Andra sat frozen, hand trembling, as he dragged the playback slider. At first, nothing, just the bed, his sleeping body. Then, something moved. Not from the door, not from the window, but from under the bed. A shape, pale, slow, deliberate, slid out onto the floor. A woman, or something like a woman, dressed in what looked like a loose white shift, stained dark around the hem. Her hair hung in stringy clumps, soaked or greasy, it was impossible to tell. She crawled on hands and knees, never standing. She moved silently toward the fridge, opened it, stared inside for a long time, then turned and looked straight at the bed, straight at him. He couldn't see her face clearly, only the suggestion of hollow eyes and lips that didn't move, but her head tilted, slowly, like a dog listening to a distant sound. Then, at 2:19 a.m., she crawled back beneath the bed and vanished. No edit, no cut, just gone. Andra didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just sat there watching the footage loop, over and over and over again. But then, without warning, the camera app froze, glitched. The footage wouldn't play anymore. It refused to export. And when he checked the phone again minutes later, the video was gone, as if it had never existed. But Andra remembered, and in that first hour of silence that followed, he looked down at the shadow under his bed and whispered, "You're not real." But deep down, he knew that wasn't true, because something moved, and it was still here. It rained again the next night. Not the gentle tapping kind, the angry, wild kind, the kind that seemed to scrub the city with fury. Thunder rolled through the Jakarta skyline like a distant war, and the windows of Andra's apartment trembled with every crash. He didn't sleep. Not properly. He lay there with the covers pulled to his chin, eyes fixed on the ceiling, too afraid to look under the bed and too exhausted to move. His mind buzzed with what he had seen, or thought he'd seen, in the footage. His heart raced with questions that didn't have answers. He didn't set the camera again. Not yet. He needed time. Time to process. Time to pretend a video never happened. And in that fragile denial, sleep eventually took him like a thief. He awoke to silence. Morning light broke through the dusty blinds. The smell of wet concrete lingered in the air. Everything looked exactly as it had the night before, until he stepped onto the kitchen tiles. The cold met his bare feet, but that wasn't what made him freeze. The footprints were back. This time, they weren't faint. They were fresh, wet, muddy, and unmistakably human. A trail of prints, smaller than his, wound from the foot of his bed across the living room to the refrigerator. Andra followed them with his eyes. They stopped in front of the fridge, turned slightly, and disappeared. Just like before. Only now they were dirtier, more detailed. You could see the curve of each toe, the heel, even the arch of the foot. No smudging, no smearing. It was as if someone had pressed their bare, filthy feet into the clean tiles with intention, like a message. Andra stared at them for several minutes before he moved. He didn't clean them, not right away. Instead, he crouched, took photos with his phone, and zoomed in. He measured them against his own feet. Too small for his, too deliberate to imagined. He pressed his palm to the tile. It was cold, but when he touched the center of one print, it was warm, slightly, faintly, recently made. He backed away. No broken locks, no open windows, no broken glass, no sounds in the night, the CCTV footage from the building. Nothing. Again. He asked the guard to double-check. The reply was casual. Sometimes the CCTV skips, power surge, lightning storm. Convenient. Back in his room, the footprints had started to fade. Not from time, from something else. By the time he returned, one print near the fridge was already gone. Not smudged, gone. Wiped clean, like someone had erased just that one. That night, he locked everything. The windows, the door, the bathroom. He even stacked a chair against the front door, balancing a spoon on the handle, a cheap alarm system from an old home invasion movie. If anything moved, he'd hear it fall. He placed his phone on record and set it on the shelf, then lay in bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. He didn't remember falling asleep, but he did remember waking up, because the spoon was on the floor. The chair was back in place, but the spoon had fallen, and across the tiles, the footprints were back. This time, they were dry, faint, like ash. And in the corner of the room, near the small shrine where his grandmother's photo stood, a joss stick had been burned, completely. He hadn't lit it. He hadn't touched that shrine in weeks. His grandmother had passed 3 years ago. The photo frame was cracked from a fall last year, and he kept telling himself he'd fix it. Now, it sat upright, clean. The floor beneath it had been wiped. A small offering plate, empty before, now had half a dried tangerine on it. Andra's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't rats. This wasn't his mind playing games. Something was in his home, and it was trying to be polite. Over the next few nights, things escalated. The woman didn't appear on camera again, at least not clearly. Whenever he tried recording, the files corrupted, glitched, timestamps warped, or the footage looped endlessly with static. But the signs remained. Footprints. A kettle still warm in the morning, though he hadn't touched it. The fridge door open, slightly ajar. One morning he found the toilet lid down. He always left it up. Another morning the towel had moved from the hook to the bedpost, folded. It wasn't malicious. Not yet. Just present. Like someone was sharing the space. A roommate he never invited. a guest he never noticed entering. He started staying up later, sleeping during the day, but it didn't help. The changes always happened between 2 and 3 a.m., always the same window. He posted about it anonymously online, a forum for paranormal experiences. Skeptics mocked him. A few believers asked for proof. One person asked if he'd moved anything sacred recently, or if he had disturbed a resting place. But one comment made his skin crawl. "She's not haunting you, she's nesting." He stopped posting after that. Instead, he deep cleaned the apartment, top to bottom, every surface, every corner. He removed the bed frame, checked underneath. Nothing. No markings, no hair, no dust. Just emptiness. But when he slept on the mattress on the floor that night, he heard her. Breathing. Not beside him. Below. His chest tightened. He couldn't move, couldn't turn, couldn't speak. The air was cold, but her breath was warm, faint, like someone sleeping under the floorboards. And then it stopped. He woke with scratches on his ankles, small, thin, like nails. He moved the mattress back onto the frame. The smell came next. It started faint, like mold, but sharper, metallic. Then stronger, rancid. It only happened around 2 a.m., always for 8 minutes, then gone. He tried incense, candles, open windows. Nothing stopped it. It wasn't in the air. It was in the floor, like the tiles were exhaling. The smell was strongest near the foot of the bed, right where the footprints always began. Andras stopped sleeping altogether. He wandered the apartment in circles, red-eyed, mumbling to himself. He tried staying out, cafes, co-working spaces, even sleeping in the building lobby. But every time he returned, the signs were there. Footprints, warm kettle, lit incense at the shrine, half-fruits offered neatly in the bowl. She was still there, living in his absence, not a visitor, a resident. And then something shifted again, not in the apartment, in him. Because one morning he found himself whispering, "I'm sorry if I disturbed you." And the footprints stopped. For 2 nights. Then they returned. But now they danced. Not in a trail, but in circles around the bed, around the shrine, around him. As if she was no longer walking, she was performing. And that night, on the back of his closet door, written in fine gray ash, "Thanks for noticing me." He wiped it clean with shaking hands. But deep down, he understood something terrifying. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was waiting to be seen. The clock on Andra's wall had never mattered before, but now he watched it like a warning light. Each night, as the hour hand dragged closer to 2, his breath became tighter. His fingers trembled before he even touched the record button. His mind, once ruled by client deadlines and pending invoices, now moved in 1-minute intervals. 2:05, 2:06, 2:07. He didn't dare blink. The woman had not appeared again, not in full, not like that first time when she crawled silently from under his bed. But the signs had never stopped, only evolved, only grown bolder. And now he needed proof, not for the world, for himself. So he borrowed a friend's DSLR, a proper one, night vision, low light sensor, external battery. He set it on a tripod, wide angle. No more corrupted iPhone footage, no more glitches, no more doubt. That night, he checked the frame twice. Clean room, centered bed, time code visible. Then he turned off the lights and lay down. The hum of the ceiling fan droned like a lullaby laced with dread. Outside, a distant siren wailed. Rain tapped against the window like impatient fingers. Andra did not sleep. Not really. He closed his eyes, let his breathing slow, slower. He counted his own heartbeat. And at exactly 2:11 a.m., he heard it. A sound like cloth dragging across tile. Soft, careful. The unmistakable hush of movement in a room meant to be still. He didn't open his eyes. He couldn't. But he felt it. That presence. That tension in the air, like someone had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. Something cold grazed his foot. Fingertips. Not wind, not fabric. He clenched his fists beneath the blanket. Sweat pooled at the base of his neck. The breathing returned. Shallow, curious. And then, silence. 8 minutes passed. Exactly. Then the room exhaled. He stayed still until 3 a.m., then bolted upright and rushed to the camera. The red light blinked, still recording. He stopped it, rewound, hands trembling. He sat on the edge of his bed and watched the screen. At first, nothing. Then, right on schedule, 2:11 a.m., the figure emerged from under the bed. The same woman, same white shift, same slow crawling movement, but this time she didn't go to the fridge. She stood. She stood tall, too tall, her limbs elongated just enough to be wrong. Her head tilted in that unnatural way, neck cocked too far to the side, like something broken at the hinge. She didn't move toward the fridge. She moved toward the camera, step by step, until her face filled the lens. Not blurred, not obscured. This time, Andra saw it. Eyes too wide, skin ashen stretched too tight over high cheekbones, lips parted in a slight twitching smile that never reached the eyes. She stared directly into the lens and whispered. No audio, no sound, but her mouth moved. One sentence, repeated, over and over. Then she turned slowly and looked at the bed, at him, still sleeping, still motionless. She walked to the edge, stood beside him, and leaned in. Closer. Closer. Then, gone. No exit, no fade, just instant disappearance at 2:19 a.m., like a light switched off. Andra hit pause. His mouth was dry, his eyes stung from staring. He rewound, watched again, watched her lips move, tried to read them. One phrase, whispered 3 times. Do you see me now? He didn't post the footage online this time. He didn't show anyone, because something inside him whispered, the more people that see her, the more real she becomes. Instead, he copied the footage onto a flash drive, disconnected it from the internet, hid it inside a sock, then inside a shoebox, taped shut, just to be safe. That morning, he left the apartment. He didn't say goodbye. He took a walk, a long one, through the crowded streets of Jakarta, past vendors selling durian, past motorbikes stacked 3 deep at red lights, past children flying paper kites from rooftops, past temples, churches, mosques. But he kept seeing her, in windows, in dark reflections, just for a second, the flicker of long hair, a pale face, gone the moment he turned. He returned that evening and found his apartment untouched, quiet, still. No footprints, no ash, no scent. For the first time in weeks, it felt normal, too normal. He checked the flash drive. It was empty. No files, no folder, no video. The folder existed, but it was blank. He connected the camera. The memory card was unreadable. His heartbeat thudded in his chest. He checked his desktop, then his external drive, then his cloud backups. Gone. Every copy, every trace, as if she had never been recorded. But the camera's internal timecode remained. It confirmed the recording took place. It even displayed the timestamps, but no visual, just static. And on the mirror, written in the faint grease of a fingertip, "Don't show them." That night, Andra didn't set up the camera. He didn't sleep. He sat in the corner of the room with a baseball bat in his hands and every light on. The woman did not appear. No footsteps, no whisper, no movement. He stayed that way until dawn. But as sunlight touched the edge of the window, something on the floor caught his eye. A carving, right under the bed. Small, jagged, fresh. He dropped to his knees and read it. Words etched into the wooden slats beneath the mattress. "Thanks for letting me stay." He backed away, crawled to the door like a man escaping a burning room, left the apartment without locking it. He didn't return for days. He stayed at a friend's house, slept on their couch, blamed it on an argument with a neighbor. But every night, he woke at exactly 2:11 a.m., even away from the apartment, even without her. As if something inside him had been permanently marked. He returned 1 week later. The place was spotless, clean, too clean. The bed was made, the floor scrubbed, the fridge stocked, and on his pillow, a single long black hair, still warm, still waiting. It began with blinking lights. The hallway bulb outside Andrew's apartment, once steady, dull yellow, had started to flicker at night. Not randomly, always in slow pulses, like a heartbeat, and only after midnight. The building maintenance man shrugged when asked. Maybe loose wiring, maybe nothing. But Andrew knew better. He knew what it meant. She was still here, and she was watching. His eyes ached from lack of sleep. His skin itched from paranoia. He'd spent the last 3 days researching hauntings online, filtering through endless stories, some absurd, some too familiar. A pattern emerged, a disturbing one. They all started with the same feeling, that something is slightly wrong, that your space is no longer just yours, that something watches while you sleep. Andra no longer questioned it. She was real, but no one else believed him, so he stopped telling them. Instead, he watched. He set up 3 cameras this time, one in the bedroom, one in the hallway, and one inside the fridge. Yes, inside, because whatever this thing was, it always opened the fridge, every single time. That small detail had started to gnaw at him. Why the fridge? Why stare into it? Why open it, look for minutes, then leave without touching anything? That night, the recording began at 2:08 a.m. The footage from the hallway camera flickered once, then stabilized. At 2:11 a.m., the bedroom feed captured movement beneath the bed. She emerged, slowly, as always, but this time she didn't crawl. She slid out backward, head turned completely upside down, chin brushing the floor, as if her neck had no bones. Then she stood. The camera caught her full height, nearly touching the ceiling. Her limbs looked stretched, her skin pale, bruised in places, hair dripping though the room was dry. She moved to the fridge, paused, opened it, and stood for 6 full minutes, doing nothing, just staring. Andra fast-forwarded the footage again and again. She didn't blink, didn't move. Her reflection in the fridge door didn't match her posture. In the footage, her real body stood still, but the reflection smiled and turned its head toward the camera. Only the reflection moved. Andra paused the video, rewound, slowed it to a crawl. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the reflection of the woman raised one hand and pointed, not at the fridge, not at the bed, but directly into the lens, directly at him. Then, 1 second later, the real figure closed the door and crawled back under the bed. The reflection faded, gone. Andra didn't sleep that night. He sat with the footage for hours, took notes, screenshots, marked timestamps. He had proof again, and this time he didn't care about her warnings. He uploaded one clip, just a small portion, to an anonymous account on a private subreddit. No face, no fridge, just the part where she moved under the bed and stood beside it, half shadow, half woman. Within an hour, the post was taken down. No reason given. He reposted, taken down again. So he uploaded it to a ghost hunting forum. The post stayed up this time, and comments trickled in. Fake. Cool effect. Low-budget indie short? Then one reply. A single sentence. It read, "She only moves when you stop believing she's real." Andra froze. He clicked the user profile. Blank. New account. No activity before or after. That night, he didn't record, didn't sleep. He stared at the corner of the room. The shadow under the bed seemed darker, deeper, more alive. He blinked once and thought he saw something in the closet mirror. Not a face, not exactly, but eyes. Wide, empty, shining slightly in the dark. Watching. He grabbed a blanket and slept on the bathroom floor with the lights on. In the morning, his bedroom door was closed. He never closed it. The lights were off, and in the mirror, in the faint outline of moisture, scrawled, "You stopped watching." He bought new cameras. He taped one to the ceiling above his bed, one hidden in the closet, one disguised in a clock, and he stayed awake as long as he could. But exhaustion always won. On the fourth night, he fell asleep at 2:04 a.m. When he woke up, every camera was turned off, every battery drained, footage wiped, except one frame, just one still image, saved on the SD card of the fridge camera. A single moment, a still shot of the woman standing in front of the fridge, her mouth stretched wider than humanly possible, not screaming, just open, too wide. In the image, something black leaked from her lips. It trailed down her chin, across her shift, into the tiles. But the most disturbing part wasn't her. It was what stood behind her. A second figure, bigger, shadowed, faceless. Andra stared at it for nearly an hour, then deleted it. He couldn't bear to look any longer. The next day, he unplugged the fridge, moved it into the hallway, taped it shut. He ate nothing cold, ordered takeout, avoided the kitchen at night. But the next morning, the fridge was back in its place, plugged in, cold, and full, with food he didn't buy. Eggs, raw meat, bottled water, lined neatly on the shelves, as if someone had been shopping, as if someone lived here, as if someone watched over this place while he slept. That night, the breathing returned, not close, not beside him, but everywhere. A low, shallow chorus of inhales and exhales from behind walls, under floorboards, above the ceiling fan. She wasn't just in the bed, she was in the walls. And she wasn't alone. There are many ways to die slowly. Andra chose sleep deprivation. Not on purpose, not as an act of rebellion or courage, but because the alternative was worse. The moment he closed his eyes, she returned, so he stopped closing them. He lived in caffeine and noise, cold showers, bitter coffee, neon light in his face. He blasted music during the day, ran the faucet, tapped his fingers constantly just to remind himself that he was still awake and still alone. But his body had limits, and those limits were closing in. The fourth day without sleep broke him. He was in the shower, trying to rinse off the shaking when the water turned cold. Not gradually, instantly. He gasped and backed away, but the knobs hadn't moved. The pipes didn't creak. Then, through the fog on the glass, he saw her, standing in the corner, head tilted, eyes too far apart, shift soaked and clinging to her frame, not outside the shower, inside it, sharing the same space. He screamed, slipped, fell. When he opened his eyes again, he was alone. The water had stopped running, the floor was dry, the towels were folded, and someone had tucked his phone beneath his arm, unlocked, displaying an image of the bathroom, empty, silent, mocking. That night, he did sleep, for 22 minutes. He dreamed of nothing but breathing, his own, hers, another voice whispering in between, counting in Bahasa, satu, dua, tiga, empat, lima, enam, tujuh, delapan, sembilan, sepuluh. then silence, then a laugh, soft, wet, wrong. He woke with blood in his nose. His ears rang like someone had screamed directly into them, and on the mirror, written in the condensation, "You're not tired, you're unraveling." He searched for help, desperately, but Jakarta doesn't have ghostbusters. It has healers, shamans, priests. He called 3. One refused to come after hearing the symptoms. One arrived and stepped into the apartment and immediately vomited. The third sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, murmuring prayers in old Javanese. After 10 minutes, she opened her eyes and told Andra something he didn't expect. "She's not a ghost," she said. "Ghosts leave. She's a ritual." Andra didn't understand. The woman's voice was low, worn but firm. "Someone once called her. Someone once invited her. Not you, but someone before you. You just let her stay." She explained that in the old parts of Jakarta, before the towers, before the roads, there were houses where women were hidden away, forgotten, banished for being unclean, unholy, or too strange. Some weren't buried, some weren't remembered. They became tidak dilihat, the unseen. They fed on absence. They lived in the in-between. Not ghosts, not spirits, but rituals. Andra asked what that meant. She only replied, "When you stop believing in her, she grows stronger. When you notice her, she becomes real. When you fear her, she stays." He didn't sleep that night, but he hallucinated. He saw hands where there were none, faces in the power outlets. He thought the fridge was breathing. He thought his own skin felt stretched, like someone had pulled it too tight. The mirror didn't show him anymore, only her. Andra tried to smash it, but the reflection screamed before the glass shattered. Not her scream, his. By the 6th day, the rules of the apartment had changed. Lights flickered in response to his thoughts. The hallway stretched longer than it should. One morning, his door opened to a room filled with water, just a foot deep, still, reflective. He stepped in. The water was cold. It soaked his ankles. The apartment was dry again an hour later, but his shoes were still wet. The next day, the walls wept. Thin streaks of moisture ran down from the ceiling corners, not from pipes, but from shadows. And every time he blinked, he heard the counting again, not whispered, spoken aloud. Satu, dua, tiga, empat. It always stopped at sepuluh, then started over, a loop, a chant, a curse. He tried stuffing tissues into his ears. Didn't help. The sound came from inside his skull, from beneath the floor, from under the bed. Always under the bed. The sleep deprivation turned into micro-dreams. He'd nod off for seconds and wake up somewhere else. On the balcony, barefoot. In the closet, sitting in the dark. Once he found himself standing in the hallway of a different building. No recollection of walking there. He looked behind him. No one. He looked forward. She was there, but not crawling, not watching, just waiting. Andra turned and ran. He didn't remember coming home, but he woke up in his own bed, and on the ceiling, etched in black soot, "When you sleep, I walk." He broke down that evening, called his sister, told her half-truths, said he wasn't well, that the apartment felt wrong, that he needed a place to crash. She agreed, but warned him, bring nothing strange. He nodded, but as he packed, something was missing. The flash drive. Gone. The one he'd hidden, taped inside a sock, in a box. He tore the room apart looking for it, found it hours later, in his mouth, clenched between his teeth. He hadn't noticed it, didn't feel it, didn't taste it. He spat it out in horror. It was warm, still humming faintly, still blinking. The data was gone, wiped again. Andra collapsed to the floor, laughing or crying, or both. He left the next morning, stayed with his sister. For 3 days it was peaceful. He ate real food. He laughed once. He started to think maybe it was over. But on the 4th night, at 2:11 a.m., he woke in her guest room and saw the closet door swing open. Not wide, just an inch, enough for a whisper to slide out. One word, la part, hungry. He ran. Didn't pack, didn't explain. He just ran. Back to the apartment. Back to the only place where she didn't follow. Because she didn't need to. She was already there. Still waiting. Still watching. Still feeding. On him. The front door was open when Andra returned. Not wide. Just enough to let the light spill into the hallway. Like an invitation. He hadn't left it that way. He was sure. But after what he had seen, after what he had felt, there were no more illusions of safety. Locks didn't matter. Time didn't matter. Distance didn't matter. She was already here. She had always been here. The apartment smelled different. Not foul, not rotting, but clean, sterile, like a hospital room scrubbed with bleach. The floors had been mopped, the rug realigned, his desk wiped spotless. Even the clutter on his shelves, old bills, USB cords, scattered pens, had been reorganized. There was a cup of warm tea on the table, steam still rising. He didn't drink tea, not anymore, but the scent was unmistakable. Chamomile. His mother used to make it when he was a child, only when he was sick, only when she knew he'd cry in his sleep. Andra stepped inside, barefoot. The floor was cool beneath him. No footprints, no ash, no messages. Just quiet. Too quiet. He walked to the kitchen. The fridge was stocked, lined in perfect symmetry. Eggs, bottled water, glass containers filled with cut fruit, and raw meat, neatly wrapped in butcher's paper. No label, no receipt, no blood, just red flesh packed into careful parcels, arranged like offerings. His hands trembled as he closed the door. Something behind him shifted. Not a sound, just the pressure of air changing. He turned. Nothing. But the bathroom door was closed, and a strip of yellow light spilled from beneath it. He hadn't left the light on. He hadn't closed the door. But there it was. And from behind it came the faintest noise. Not breathing. Not movement. Something worse. Teeth, chattering, as if someone were standing just inches behind the door, biting the air. Slow, mechanical, constant. Andra stepped back, didn't speak, didn't blink. Then, all at once, the sound stopped. The light turned off, and the door creaked open by an inch, just enough to let the silence in. That night, he didn't set up cameras. He didn't check his phone. He didn't write anything down. He just sat in bed, still, waiting. At 2:11 a.m., the air shifted. Andra's body reacted before his mind could. His hands gripped the sheets. His feet curled under him. Goosebumps bloomed across his skin. The light in the hallway flickered once, then died. From beneath the bed came a whisper. Not a voice, not a language, just a vibration of air, a presence. And then he felt it. Weight on the bed. Not beside him, not at his feet, above him, as if someone had slowly climbed on top of the blanket, straddled his chest, and leaned in. Her breath was cold, but her body was not. It radiated something else, not heat, not warmth, but presence, thick, ancient, heavy with memory. Andra squeezed his eyes shut, counted. Satu, dua, tiga, empat. Her fingers brushed his cheek, too long, too dry. Then a whisper in his ear. 3 words, not Indonesian, not English, but he understood them. Thank you, host. He woke at sunrise, alone, sweating. His chest ached. His hands were clenched so tight his nails had broken skin. He sat up slowly. Everything looked normal, but the room felt different. Wider. The walls slightly farther apart. The ceiling higher. He walked to the kitchen. Inside, the fridge was stocked, polished. It gleamed with unnatural clarity. But something was wrong. His reflection didn't move when he did. It stared a second longer, smiled a second later. Then it caught up. He turned away, couldn't bear to look again. On the counter was a toothbrush, new, still in plastic, pink, not his. He left the apartment that afternoon, tried to work at a cafe, but his hands shook too much to hold a pen. The barista asked him if he was all right. He smiled, nodded, and in the reflection of the coffee machine, he saw her, sitting at the table behind him, legs crossed, head tilted, watching. He turned. She was gone. He ran out, didn't look back. That night, he returned. He had nowhere else to go. He entered slowly, expecting something, anything to leap from the dark, but nothing did. The lights worked. The kettle was cold. The fridge was silent. He almost believed the worst had passed, until he stepped into the bedroom and found his bed already made, pillow fluffed, blanket folded back like a hotel, and on the nightstand a folded piece of paper. One sentence written in perfect cursive. Sleep well. I will walk softly tonight. His hands trembled, but he lay down. What else could he do? What was left? He turned off the lights, closed his eyes, and for the first time in days, he slept. Deep, heavy, dreamless. And in the middle of the night, he woke for just a moment, long enough to see a figure standing in the doorway. Not watching, just being. As if this was her home now, as if he were the guest. And somewhere deep inside, he accepted it. He didn't scream, he didn't run, he just whispered, "You were here." And the dark whispered back, "I never left." Andra had stopped asking if she was real. Now he was asking why she stayed. She no longer felt like a ghost. She didn't float. She didn't scream. She wasn't bound by the rules of hauntings he'd read online. She cooked. She cleaned. She moved things with care, not chaos. And every time she appeared, she felt more present, more comfortable, like she lived here, like she belonged. Andra didn't. Not anymore. He began avoiding his own bed. He slept on the balcony once, sat in the stairwell with a blanket another night. But the further he fled, the closer she felt. Her presence was no longer tied to time or space. Not just 2:11 a.m. Now she lingered in the quiet moments, behind bathroom doors, inside reflections, at the edges of dreams, until one night she didn't appear at all. Not under the bed, not in the mirror, not in the camera feed. Andra waited, but she never came. He should have been relieved. He wasn't. The silence was worse. It meant she had moved deeper, deeper than under the bed. The next morning, the ceiling fan didn't spin. The lights flickered slower than usual. His phone wouldn't charge. The air felt thick. He opened a window, and for the first time in weeks, a breeze entered. Cool, strange, familiar. He didn't recognize the smell at first. Burnt ash, wet earth, copper, like old incense and blood. He closed the window, sat on the floor, and finally spoke aloud. "Who are you?" No answer, but something in the walls creaked. He stood, walked to the bed. Kneeling, he lifted the mattress again. Nothing. Wood slats. Dust. But now something else. A draft. A faint push of air rising from the center. He leaned in. His fingers searched along the wood until they found it. A gap, just wide enough to feel the difference. He pried it open. One board came loose, then another. And beneath the bed, beneath the boards, there was a hollow, a crawl space, shallow, barely a meter deep, but real. And inside it, the remains of something old. Charred wood, black ash, strings of red thread knotted in loops, hair, coarse, bundled, tied together with rusted nails, and a doll. No face, just cloth stitched with black thread where eyes should have been. Its body was stiff with age, and beneath it, scratched on the floor, symbols, circles, crosses, crescent shapes interwoven. He reached down, touched the edge of one symbol, and felt something sharp. A bone. Tiny. Not animal. Human. He recoiled, ran to the bathroom, vomited, washed his hands 3 times, but the smell clung to him like smoke from a funeral that never ended. That evening he returned to the crawl space, lit a candle, lowered it slowly. The flame didn't flicker. No wind, no draft, but shadows twisted along the edges. And then writing, etched on the inside wall, hidden until light kissed it. A name, half erased, unreadable. Below it, more carvings, not in Bahasa, not in any alphabet Andra recognized, but they pulsed, as if the wood remembered pain. Andra recorded everything, photos, notes. He posted again, this time in obscure online forums dedicated to Southeast Asian occultism. A user replied, a professor of anthropology from Jakarta. He recognized the symbols, not letters, not language, but ritual markers, old, used in ceremonies of erasure, practices where a person was not just banished, but forgotten, not killed, not exorcised, just written out of the world, made to disappear, removed from memory, documents, family lines, erased from the land. But sometimes, he warned, the ritual fails. Sometimes the person becomes something else. A penungu, a dweller, a watcher. Not spirit, not ghost, but residual will with nowhere left to rest. When no one remembers you, you remember yourself too loudly, and the walls begin to echo. That night, Andra dreamed of her for the first time, not as a monster, not as a shadow, but as a girl, young, barefoot, wearing the same white shift, sitting alone in a dark room, legs folded, whispering to a bowl of burnt flowers. She cried without sound, and in her lap, the doll, faceless, identical to the one beneath his floor. He woke with tears on his face, and something in his hands, ash, still warm. He returned to the crawlspace one final time, not to film, not to document, just to see. He climbed in, slowly. Dust clung to his skin. The ceiling was too low to sit upright. He pressed himself flat, face to wood, and listened. For 10 minutes, nothing. Then movement. Not behind him, not in the apartment. Below. A soft scratching, like fingernails across stone. Followed by a breath. Not his, not behind, but directly beneath his chest, inside the floor. And then a voice. Not loud, not angry, just there, soft, sad. I was here before you. He crawled out, shaking, left the boards open, sat on the floor for hours. When night fell, he did not record, not run, not hide. He simply turned off the lights, lay in bed, and whispered, I know now. You were buried alive in silence, and I heard you. For the first time, she didn't come, but beneath him, in the floor's pulse, he felt her breathing, soft, steady, grateful. The city had two faces, one that smiled for tourists, shone through glass towers, and echoed in shopping malls filled with neon and prayer calls, and the other, buried beneath concrete, cracked between alleyways, hung from broken windows like damp laundry waiting to forget its owner. Jakarta was old, older than its maps, older than its street names, and much older than the apartment where Andra lived. He sat in the small warung near Pasar Baru, cradling a cup of bitter black kopi, hands still dusted with ash. Across from him sat the old man, the shaman the anthropology professor had recommended. The man's face was lined like riverbeds in dry season. His eyes were half clouded, but his voice carried weight. It didn't rise, it pressed down. He didn't speak right away, just stared, as if Andra had come carrying something invisible, which in truth he had. After minutes of silence, the old man finally said, "You didn't build on haunted land. You built on unfinished memory." Andra asked what that meant. The man didn't explain. He told a story instead. Once, long ago, before the towers and the motorbikes and the apps that measured sleep cycles, there were places in Jakarta you weren't supposed to name after sunset. Not because they were cursed, but because they were forgotten on purpose. Villages that disappeared not by fire or flood, but by shame. Places where people went to hide their mistakes, and most of all, their women. Women who were too loud, too strange, too touched by spirits. Some were midwives, some were outcasts, some were just inconvenient. They were taken to rumah gelap, shadow houses, hidden between fields or behind the homes of wealthier men. They were kept quiet for weeks, for months, for years. Sometimes they were left alone. Sometimes they were married to the dark. But always they were made invisible. Until one day they were gone. Not buried, not mourned, just erased. But memory is a stubborn thing. Even when no one speaks of a person, the silence becomes shaped like them. And if enough silence gathers, it starts to speak back. Andra listened, skin crawling. The shaman continued. Some of those houses were built over. Some were paved beneath markets and malls. But some, like the one you live in, were left alone for a reason. Because the ritual didn't work. Because she stayed. Not as a ghost, but as a penungu, a dweller. Someone not dead, but removed from time. Trapped in the in-between. Still seeking routine. Still folding sheets. Still boiling water. Still waiting to be seen. Until someone notices, and then she moves. Andra asked how to remove her. The man shook his head. You don't. You don't banish someone who was never buried. You remember her. You acknowledge her. And then you live with her. That is the price for living in a place built on erased names. Andra left the warung in silence. The sun was setting behind the smog. Motorbikes buzzed like insects. Vendors shouted into the chaos. Andra walked slowly, listening for her in the shadows. He no longer feared her. He pitied her. Because for the first time, he understood. She wasn't haunting him. She was performing, repeating, living the only life she'd ever known, trapped in motions no one watched, no one thanked, no one remembered. And now that he had seen her, she didn't want to leave. She wanted to be kept. That night, he brought home offerings, not incense, not candles, not garlic or salt, but routine. He cleaned the apartment top to bottom, placed flowers at the edge of the bed, set a bowl of warm water by the fridge, hung a white cloth in the closet, and left space at the table. He didn't pray, he didn't chant, he simply whispered, I see you, and I know you were here first. The lights flickered once, then steadied. The fan turned. The air calmed. Andra lay in bed facing the ceiling, eyes open, listening. At 2:11 a.m., she arrived. He didn't need to look. He felt her enter, felt her pause, not at the bed, but at the table. She sat, silent, present, and for the first time, she didn't stare at him. She rested, content, like a woman who had come home after wandering centuries in the dark. She stayed for 8 minutes, then disappeared into the floor, not vanishing, just fading, softly, gently. And as she left, the mirror in the hallway fogged over. One word appeared. Thanks.
For a while, the silence felt holy,
Andra followed the rules. He left offerings, he didn't record, he didn't provoke. No more cameras, no more posts, no more questions. Just presence. Each night, at exactly 2:11 a.m., the air would shift. She would arrive, walk her path, open the fridge, stand in stillness, and disappear. Like a routine neither of them dared to break. He began calling it the quiet hour. It was no longer terrifying. It was familiar. A nightly ritual between two beings sharing space, one living, one forgotten. Sometimes he left tea, sometimes incense, always silence. He even started talking to her, not expecting answers, just to fill the room. Short sentences. "I'm tired today. I finished a logo project. The rain was bad." He never heard a reply, but the apartment always felt warmer after. Not physically, spiritually. As if she approved, as if she was listening. On the 12th night of quiet, Andra didn't make an offering. Not because he forgot, because he wanted to test it, to see if peace was real or if it simply tolerated him. He left the room untouched. No tea, no water, no folded towel, no words. He turned off the lights, lay in bed, closed his eyes, and waited. At 2:11 a.m., nothing happened. No air shift, no breath, no weight on the bed, no fridge creak, nothing. He almost sighed in relief until he opened his eyes at 2:19 and saw the candle lit. He hadn't lit it. He hadn't touched it in days. The flame flickered blue, and beside it, something new. A bowl filled with salt water. Inside it floated his own necklace, a gift from his sister. He got out of bed slowly, walked to the bowl. It wasn't hot, but the water was red. Thin lines curled outward like ink. He reached in, pulled the necklace out. The metal was warm. The pendant cracked. He stared at it for a long time, then turned to the mirror. One word had been written in steam: forget? That night he apologized, out loud, multiple times, but the apartment didn't answer. The lights didn't flicker, the air didn't shift. It was like speaking into a void. Andra sat in the kitchen, head in his hands, whispering the same phrase again and again. "I didn't mean to disrespect you. I didn't mean to forget." The next morning, the shrine was back. Not his, hers. It sat in the corner, made of cardboard, thread, and dried petals. In its center was the doll, faceless, its arms stitched down, its chest sewn shut, and below it, a folded page torn from one of his sketchbooks. The drawing was his, but he hadn't made it. It was of himself, sleeping, and under the bed, the outline of her body curled in the shadows, her hand reaching up toward the mattress. But the most disturbing part wasn't the sketch. It was what was drawn inside his mouth, a thread, coming out of his lips, connecting directly to hers, like a puppet, like a shared breath, like an umbilical cord still intact. Andra tore it up, burned it, opened all the windows, let the city roar in. He thought that would break it. It didn't. That night he dreamed for the first time in weeks. She was in the dream, but not crawling, not watching, just standing in the corner of his room, arms by her sides, shift clean, her face still blank. But this time it wasn't missing. It was covered, wrapped in gauze, blood seeping through. Andra tried to speak, but his jaw wouldn't move. He reached up to his face and found it stitched shut. not skin to skin, but thread, thin, tight, holding his lips closed. He tried to scream, but the sound came from beneath him, from her. Muffled, pained, repetitive, a chant, a hunger. He woke up gasping, his lips bleeding. He must have bitten them in his sleep. The pillow was stained. He went to the mirror, opened his mouth. No thread, but at the back of his tongue a taste of metal. And at the bottom of the mirror, scrawled in dried salt, "Feed it." He spent the day in a daze, tried to work, tried to clean, tried to pray, but every corner of the apartment felt watched, not just by her, but by the quiet itself. It felt hungry. He boiled water, lit incense, prepared a new offering, but something had changed. The peace was gone. She didn't want routine anymore. She wanted attention. He placed the bowl by the door, whispered, "I hear you." But the air remained still. The light above the bed flickered once and died. At 2:11 a.m., the noise returned. Not footsteps, not breath, but movement. Wet, dragging. She didn't crawl this time. She rose, not from under the bed, from the wall. Her shape peeled out like shadow becoming flesh. Her limbs bent too far, her arms elongated, and her face, still wrapped, was now bleeding through the gauze. She walked past the bed, past the fridge, and stopped at the sketch pad, the one Andra had left on the table. She opened it, drew something, tore the page, placed it on the floor, and vanished. He waited until sunrise, then walked to it. One word, drawn in thick charcoal, "Again." And beside it, a figure of him sleeping, and her, closer now, her hand no longer reaching, but touching. Her fingers pressed to his neck, and below them, the words, "One of us must sleep, one of us must feed." She used to appear. Now she stays. Andra no longer waits for 2:11 a.m. because she is no longer tethered to time. She is here when he wakes. She is here when he works. She is here when he blinks. But not always in form. She is in the hum of the fan, in the stillness of the curtains that should move but don't, in the reflection that's slower than the movement, in the cupboard that clicks twice when it closes. She is in everything, and she is watching, not for validation, but for obedience, because this is her home now. And he, the tenant, the guest, the permitted. It started with the mirror. Andra had avoided it for weeks, but that morning it called to him, not by sound, but by silence, a silence that waited. When he stepped into the bathroom, the air was colder. The light flickered, then steadied. The mirror was spotless, too clean. No dust, no smudge, no fog. But at its center, not a crack, not a message. A handprint, perfect, pale, pressed from the inside. Fingertips long, fingers slightly too many. And beneath the print, a ripple, as if the glass were soft, breathing. He leaned closer, and for just a second, the reflection didn't mimic him. It stood still as he moved, and behind its shoulder, a woman, wrapped in a white shift. Not beside him, not behind him, just behind the reflection, watching, then gone. He covered the mirror, nailed cloth over it. But that night, he saw her again in the TV. Turned off. Blank. But the screen glowed faintly, and in its dark surface, her face. Closer now. Her gauze removed, revealing skin stretched tight, eyes that had no iris, just void, lips that curled in a permanent, almost smile, but not human, not cruel, just patient, as if saying, "Why pretend I'm not here?" The house began to adjust to her. The lights dimmed before she arrived. The water heater refused to work after sunset. The fridge door opened itself once, slowly, and stayed open. Andra tried taping it shut. He found the tape peeled off by morning, twisted into a spiral, laid in a perfect circle at the foot of his bed, like a sigil, like a warning, or a nest. One night, he returned from buying food, instant noodles, water, toothpaste, nothing special. But when he opened the door, the apartment had changed, subtly. The curtains replaced, not by him, but by something older. White linen, hand-stitched edges. The stitching was unfamiliar, rough, traditional, frayed at the corners. He walked slowly, afraid to touch anything. The floor had been swept. A small clay bowl sat on the table, filled with flower petals. A faint scent of sandalwood lingered. And the walls, once bare, now held faint charcoal marks, spirals, shapes. A woman drawn over and over again, always headless, always surrounded by crosses, always standing in front of a house. This house, she had decorated. She had moved in. That night, he saw her outside, from the balcony just after midnight. He looked down at the alley below, and there she was, standing beneath the street lamp, motionless, looking up, not at the building, not at the floor, but directly at him, her head tilted back, hands folded in front of her, still, waiting. As if she was seeing him from inside the building and from below it, as if her presence no longer obeyed distance. He stepped back into the room, closed the curtains, sat in the center of the floor, and whispered, "What do you want?" The answer didn't come in sound, but in a vibration through the walls, through the floor, through his chest, a feeling that translated not in language, but in need. She doesn't want freedom. She doesn't want revenge. She wants continuity, a home, a rhythm, a witness, someone to share the silence. The next morning, the fridge was full. He hadn't stocked it, but everything inside was labeled, wrapped, organized. Some containers bore writing not in Bahasa, but in an older script. He recognized one word, his name, written in thin charcoal on the lid of a clay jar. He didn't open it. He never would. He simply moved it to the back and closed the door. Then came the knocking. At first, he thought it was from outside, the hallway, the neighbors, but it always happened at the same time, 4:44 a.m. 3 knocks, soft, deliberate, from the inside of the closet. The first morning, he ignored it. The second morning, he opened the door and found nothing. The third morning, he opened the door and found an old blanket folded neatly on the floor. It hadn't been there before. It smelled like jasmine and smoke.
and there was a drawing tucked into it, a child's drawing, stick figures, a house, a tree, and a woman, smiling, standing beside a figure labeled Mama. He burned it. The next day, another appeared, this one more detailed, crayon and ink, a family of 3, Andra in the center, the woman on the right, and a crib on the left, empty, labeled Next. He stopped fighting. He couldn't leave. Every time he tried, something followed. Voices in stairwells, reflections that didn't match, electronic locks that refused to open. People on the street stepping around him, wide-eyed, as if sensing just something behind. She had nested in him, and in return, she offered stability. The apartment never broke down. Food never spoiled. The bills somehow paid. The lights stayed warm. The silence became familiar. Andra spoke less. He moved slower. He forgot what day it was. But the quiet never hurt him, as long as he respected it, as long as he stayed, as long as she lived here. And each night, just before sleep, she would come, not crawling, not whispering, but simply entering, like air, like routine, like something that was always meant to be there. She would sit beside the bed, watch him with eyes that no longer asked permission. She didn't need it, not anymore. This was home. Andra closed his eyes and said out loud, "Welcome back." The room pulsed once. The mirror cracked just slightly at the edges, and a voice inside him whispered, "You finally understand."
He left, packed a single bag, didn't look back, didn't say goodbye. The apartment was quiet when he stepped out, too quiet, like a stage waiting for the next act. But Andre had made up his mind. He couldn't stay, not another night. He hadn't seen his reflection in 2 days, not truly. The apartment had started erasing him, not violently, just slowly. And that kind of forgetting was worse. So he left, not to a hotel, not to a stranger, but to a friend, Raka, an old college roommate, someone who owed him nothing and yet still opened his door when Andre called. Said he could crash on the couch just for a few nights. Raka's place was warm, messy, alive. The walls weren't painted. The fridge was loud. There were socks on the floor and empty glasses on the sink. But it felt human. Andre didn't know what to do with that. He slept that night on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like detergent and dust. And for the first time in months, he dreamed of nothing. Just black, still, breathless. Peace. Until 2:11 a.m., when he opened his eyes and the lights were off. The fan had stopped spinning, and across the room, in the corner near the balcony, something moved. Slowly. A shape. Pale. Still. Watching. Andre sat up. Squinted. No sound, no breath. But there, just at the edge of shadow, she stood, wrapped in white, head tilted, no longer waiting. He blinked, and she was gone. The lights came back, the fan resumed. Raka snored from the next room. Normalcy returned. But Andre didn't sleep again. He knew now, He hadn't escaped because she hadn't stayed behind. She had followed. The next morning he didn't speak of it. He helped Raka make coffee. They talked about old times, deadlines, overpriced groceries. But when Raka left for work, Andre opened the closet. Inside was a familiar smell: charcoal, salt, petals, and on the top shelf, something impossible: his sketchbook, the one he'd left behind. It was open, the page drawn. A man sleeping on the couch, a woman standing beside him, and underneath the same phrase she had written before: "One of us must sleep, one of us must feed." Andre closed the book, didn't touch it. He paced the living room for hours, waited for Raka to return. When he did, Andre told him everything, almost. Not about the crawl space, not about the doll, not about the fridge, just the presence, the woman, the movement. Raka went quiet, then laughed, said it was probably sleep paralysis, said Andre was overworked, said maybe he needed to talk to someone. Andre smiled, nodded, pretended to agree, but that night he stayed awake, just in case. At 2:11 a.m., nothing moved. No lights flickered, no air shifted. He breathed deeply, waited, and then, at 2:13 a.m., his phone buzzed. A message, no sender, just a file, an image. He opened it. His face, sleeping, from above, taken from the ceiling. He dropped the phone. It cracked, but the image burned in his memory. The bed, the couch, his mouth slightly open, and in the top corner, faint but visible, her hand, reaching toward his throat. He left at sunrise, didn't wake Raka, didn't write a note. He walked the city until his legs ached. Every shop window reflected her face. Every alley whispered her breath. By nightfall, he had only one place left to go: home. The apartment greeted him like it had been waiting. The door was unlocked, the lights dimmed, and on the table, a bowl of warm soup, still steaming. He stepped inside. Nothing moved, but the energy wrapped around him like a blanket, not comforting, not cold, just inevitable. The walls pulsed. The mirrors were gone, replaced by blank panels of cloth. The doll sat at the center of the room now, not hidden beneath the bed, lit by a single candle. Its stitched mouth had been cut open, thread dangling like a loose smile. And beside it, his toothbrush, his watch, a small lock of hair. She had unpacked him, unstitched him, reclaimed him. He walked to the bed, sat down, didn't speak, didn't cry. He simply laid back and whispered, "I understand. You're not attached to this place. You're attached to me." She didn't respond with words, only presence. The lights flickered, the air thickened, and from beneath the bed she emerged one last time. Not crawling, not reaching, just rising, until she stood at the edge, looking down, her face still blank, but somehow relieved. She leaned forward. Andre closed his eyes, didn't flinch, didn't move, and as her breath brushed his ear, she whispered, "You slept, so I could stay. Now I stay, so you can never wake." The days began to blur. He no longer left the apartment. Not because he couldn't, because he didn't want to risk her following again. He had seen what happened when he tried to run. She wasn't a house spirit. She wasn't bound to wood or walls. She was bound to him, to his mind, his attention, his belief. She lived in the space between thought and fear, between noticing and denying. Andra tried everything to weaken her. He unplugged every device, covered every mirror, removed every object she had touched. He even tried sleeping at different hours, never the same time, never lying in the same direction. But it didn't matter. She always knew. The rules had changed. Or maybe there had never been rules, only obedience. He opened his laptop to search for help again, but the browser wouldn't load. No matter what site he tried, the same message appeared. Centered, black background, white text. If she knows you know, she stays. He closed the laptop, walked to the window, looked out at the city, but the skyline had changed. The lights were dimmer. The buildings faded at the edges. People on the streets below walked slower, as if they were part of a different story, a different dream, as if he were watching the world from behind a veil. She had brought something with her, a lens, a filter. He no longer trusted his eyes, and worse, he no longer trusted time. Some nights he would fall asleep at 3 a.m., wake up at 3:02 a.m. But hours had passed. The clock wouldn't move, but his beard would grow. The candle would burn down. The food would rot. Reality was folding, and at the center of that fold was her. He tried to distract himself. Books, music, paint. But she found ways to seep in. A lyric would repeat one line too many times. A page would turn blank in the middle of a sentence. A brushstroke would form her silhouette before he even realized what he was painting. She was everywhere he gave his attention, because belief was fuel. He remembered the comment on that first viral post, the one he had ignored. She only moves when you stop believing she's real. At the time, it made no sense. Now it was the only law that mattered, because she wasn't haunting him out of vengeance. She was haunting him out of survival, out of need, to be remembered, to be witnessed, to be believed in. The more attention he gave her, the more real she became. But if he stopped, if he truly, completely stopped believing she's real, would she vanish? Or would he? He decided to try. One final time. He wrote down her name, the one carved beneath the cross space, half erased, and burned it. He turned off all the lights, sat in the center of the apartment, and began the hardest act of all, forgetting. He closed his eyes, emptied his thoughts, forced his mind to imagine nothing, not her face, not her voice, not her rituals, only silence, stillness, unbelief. Minutes passed, then hours, then a sound. Not a whisper, not a footstep, but a tremble, like the apartment shivered. He opened his eyes. The walls bled, not blood, not liquid, but shadow. Darkness leaking from every corner, dripping from the lights, and at the center of it, her, kneeling, hands pressed to the floor, hair loose, breathing heavy, struggling, fading. He watched as she tried to stand,
but her knees buckled. She wasn't crawling toward him. She was collapsing because he had stopped feeding her. He had stopped seeing her. And without attention, she was unraveling. But then, he blinked. A thought slipped through. A single thread of emotion. Pity, regret, recognition. And that was enough. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. She screamed. Not a sound, but a shockwave. The lights burst, the windows cracked. Andra flew backward, hit the wall, collapsed. The room went dark. When he woke, it was morning, bright, bird song in the distance, the fridge humming quietly, the fan spinning. Everything was normal, too normal. He stood slowly, walked to the mirror. His reflection matched him, moved at the same time. No delay, no shadow behind him, no second figure. He checked under the bed. Empty. The crawl space was sealed, the doll gone, the shrine gone. She was gone, completely. Finally, he had done it. He had starved her out. By not believing, by not remembering, by refusing to see. He cried, not out of joy, but release. He was free. Or so he thought. That night he slept deeply. No dreams, no breath on his neck, no voice in his ear. He awoke just after sunrise and stretched, smiled, opened the fridge. It was empty. He closed it, turned, and froze. On the wall, just above the light switch, 3 words had been carved into the paint. Not written, carved, rough, shaky, like done by hand, with a knife, or a key, or a fingernail. They read, "You looked anyway."
She didn't come back all at once, not like before. No crawling from the bed, no flickering lights, no warm kettle. This time, she returned like rot, slow, patient, invisible at first, but spreading. By the time Andra noticed, she had already filled the walls again. It started with the air, too still, not heavy, but hollow, like the apartment had been exhaled and never inhaled again. He stood in the kitchen and realized he couldn't hear the fridge humming anymore. He walked to the window and saw the view was the same, but flatter, like a painting. There were no birds, no sound, no movement in the street below. And when he tried to play music, his phone refused. All apps crashed. Even static wouldn't play. Only silence. The quiet had come back, but now it wasn't comforting. It was dead, and it was inside everything, even him. Andra spoke aloud, to himself, to her, to the air, but the room didn't respond. He tried to light incense. It refused to burn. He placed salt at the corners of the floor. It vanished overnight. He checked his reflection again. It matched him perfectly, but the eyes looked hollow, not haunted, empty, as if she had taken something and not returned it. A piece of him, a memory, or worse, meaning. His drawings changed. He hadn't picked up a pencil in weeks, but that morning he found a sheet filled with sketches on the table. His lines, his style, but not his intent. The shapes were repetitive. Human figures with missing eyes, beds with shadows beneath them, rooms that didn't have doors. And in every image, written in tiny, curling script along the edges. There is no outside. He flipped through the rest of the sketchbook. Every page had something on it now, in the same ink, same hand, but he hadn't touched it. Not since the mirror, not since the forgetting. He tore the pages out, burned them, but in the ashes, the shapes remained, not visible, but implied, like fingerprints that hadn't left skin, only memory. People stopped calling. At first, he thought it was coincidence, then neglect. But when he checked his phone, his call history was gone, his contacts empty, even photos, no trace of anyone else. He logged into his email. It was blank, no inbox, no spam, no login history, as if he had never existed beyond these walls. Or worse, as if he'd been reclaimed, rewritten into this place, like she had done to herself, like she wanted company. That night there was no 2:11 a.m., no hour of movement, because now time didn't matter. Every hour became hollow. The clocks ticked, but the minutes never changed. The ceiling fan spun but didn't move air. The light stayed on but didn't illuminate. It was like living inside a paused film. But Andra was still moving, still breathing, still waiting for a cue that would never come. Until someone knocked on the door. 3 soft taps, then silence. His heart froze. He hadn't heard another human sound in days. He walked slowly to the door, looked through the peephole. Nothing. He opened it anyway. No one in the hall, but on the floor, a package, wrapped in brown paper. No label, no tape, just string tied in a bow. He brought it inside, opened it. Inside, a tape recorder, old, analog, with 1 cassette already inside. He hesitated, then pressed play. A voice crackled to life. His own voice, speaking slowly, calmly. "You're not the only one. They're everywhere. They just don't speak, because if they do, they'll remember too much. So they stay quiet, and so she stays quiet, because she's listening, always listening, even now." The tape clicked off. Andra stared at the recorder, then reached for the eject button. Found no button, no tape. The recorder was sealed shut. Fake, or no longer mechanical, just present. Another symbol, another artifact of the quiet. He opened his laptop, tried to write something, anything, just to prove he was still real, still thinking, still outside of her. But every time he typed, the words shifted. He wrote, "My name is Andra." It changed to, "My name was Andra." He tried again, "I am alone in this apartment." It became, "We are never alone in this home." He shut the laptop, threw it across the room. The screen cracked, but the keyboard continued to glow. Letters flickering in rhythm, one word repeating, "Stay, stay, stay." The next morning he opened the door, not to leave, but to see. There was no hallway, just fog, thick, silent, alive. He stepped back, closed the door, turned, and found her. Not in the shadows, not at the edge, but in the chair, at the table, sitting, hands folded,
face uncovered, still featureless, but not blank. Her presence had shape now, definition, ownership. Andra spoke. "What do you want?" She tilted her head, and though no mouth moved, the answer echoed inside him, not with words, but need. "I want to be remembered. I want to be shared, not just here, everywhere. I want more than you." Andra felt it in his spine, the shift, the intention. She was growing, not just inside the apartment, but inside him, and inside everyone else who had ever seen her. The commenters, the viewers, the passers-by who looked too long through the window. It wasn't a haunting anymore. It was a seeding. She wasn't alone, not anymore, because she had made him her altar, and through him others would come, one by one. They would see, they would believe, they would fall silent, and they would stay. That night, someone else knocked on the door. A voice called softly from the hallway. "Hello? Is this where you recorded that ghost video? I saw it online. I know it's old, but I think she's in my house too." Andra didn't respond, didn't breathe, didn't move. He just stared at the door and smiled, because it was already beginning. The hollow hours were spreading, and she was no longer just a presence. She was a network.
The apartment is quiet now. Not the silence of fear, the silence of completion. She no longer hides, no longer moves only at night. She has nothing to prove. This is her place. It always was. Andra is gone. Not missing, not dead, just absent. No police report, no struggle. His lease continues to pay itself. His lights remain on. Packages arrive at his door, rot unopened. Neighbors notice the smell, but only in passing. They don't knock. They don't ask. They don't want to see, because deep down, they already know. Everyone who lives here knows, even if they pretend not to. They know about the floorboards. They know about the walls. They know that if they listen too closely at night, they'll hear her. And once you hear her, you belong. The apartment manager finally opens the door. Not because anyone complains, only because a new tenant is scheduled to move in. Andra's emergency contact never answered. And the apartment? Immaculate. Bed sheets folded, air fresh, candles unlit. The only thing out of place is the bed. When they lift the mattress to clean, they find words carved into the wood. One of us must sleep. One of us must feed. Thanks for letting me stay. The manager frowns, says nothing. He's seen it before. 2 weeks later, the unit is rented again to a quiet woman from out of town, a designer, single, keeps to herself, unpacks quickly. She likes the lighting, the space, the stillness. On her second night, she wakes up thirsty, walks into the kitchen barefoot, feels something strange beneath her feet. She flips on the light. Footprints. Faint. Not hers. Too small. Leading from under the bed to the fridge. Back again. She blinks. The prints vanish. She laughs, says it's just the floor settling, maybe her imagination. She doesn't believe in ghosts. She doesn't remember the listing had once gone viral. She doesn't know the name Andra. She just sleeps. And on the third night, she hears breathing. Not beside her, not above, below. Across the city, another man wakes up to scratches on his ankles. Another woman finds a mirror that doesn't reflect on time. Someone else plays back a recording that should be empty and sees her, crawling, staring, smiling. Word spreads, clips resurface, old forums light up. A story is told again. She moved into my apartment while I slept. They repost the footage. It goes viral again, but only for a moment, because the file becomes corrupted. The page disappears. The video won't load. And in its place is a still frame, in black and white. A bed, a man sleeping, and a sentence carved across the bottom. You looked anyway. And somewhere, beneath floorboards no one checks, she waits. Not hiding, not haunting, just being. Because someone will always look. Someone will always doubt. Someone will always forget the warning. And once you see her, it's already too late. You become part of the quiet. You become part of her. You become the reason she stays. And when your story ends, someone else will move in, and she'll say it again, not out loud, but in the breath between breaths, the whisper behind the wall. Thanks for letting me stay.